Lord of the Mysteries. Chapter 1021. Cross. Zio hesitated when she heard Furz's question. We were discovered. They had said something similar before, but they were repeating it again now. However, it didn't have the same meaning. Previously, it was referring to being discovered by the Guardian or Monitor when she recognized Sherman. Now, the crux of the matter was that their choice and corresponding actions were expected and arranged by the person behind the scenes. They had no secrets to speak of. This meant that the chance that Zio had been longing for might have really appeared, but what lay behind this matter was inconceivable. If we follow the intention behind this message, the final outcome will depend on whether she has good intentions, but that's not something under our control, Zio added from a rational angle. The reason why she had used she to represent the person behind the scenes was because she had recalled the fragrance she smelled when she lost Sherman the other time. Furz listened quietly and nodded in agreement. Yes, we're too passive in this matter. The best option is to leave this place. As soon as she finished speaking, she looked at the warehouse. She opened her mouth but didn't say anything further. She was reminded of the possible situation Sherman was in, and she suspected that he was in grave danger. However, she deliberately ignored it in the end and didn't mention it. To her, Sherman was a person who existed in Zio's descriptions. He was no different from a character in a novel. If she had the strength and opportunity to save him in passing, she was willing to do so, but to bear the risk because of that and allow her friend to be rash, putting her life in danger, was definitely not something within her considerations. Zio nodded and said, All right, we'll leave now. However, the person who left that comment definitely wouldn't be happy to see us do so. She will definitely hinder us. Let's do it this way. We'll escape in different directions and make that person choose one person. Whoever successfully leaves this area will immediately cause a commotion and attract the official Beyonders. Why don't we directly cause a commotion here? Furz subconsciously raised a question. It will definitely be stopped or foiled. Zio gave her excuse. Furz nodded thoughtfully. Makes sense. All right, let's not delay it any further. Let's begin. Zio didn't say another word as she took out her transparent, nearly invisible triangular blade. With her back bent, she leaped out of her hiding spot and ran out of the harbor amidst the shadows. The triangular blade was a mystical item she had spent 500 pounds through Mam Hermit to get the artisan to forge with the ancient wraith's powder and remnant spirituality. It was called Wintry Blade. Anyone hit by this weapon, even if it were a gentle touch, would be frozen stiff. They would even lose control of their thoughts as though they were possessed by a wraith. At the same time, once the battle continued, Wintry Blade's enemies would gradually have their thoughts turn sluggish and their actions become rigid and dull, even if they didn't touch the triangular blade. And Wintry Blade's negative effects wasn't that terrifying. Furthermore, there was only one: the wielder would slowly lose their body temperature and transform into an undead. Once a certain time limit was exceeded, this process would become irreversible. Therefore, Zio had recently enjoyed jogging more or riding a bicycle at lightning speeds to generate heat to resist the loss of temperature. But even so, she had only managed to extend the time it took before she kept Wintry Blade away from her body from 3 hours to 4 hours. After running a certain distance, Zio turned back and realized that Furz had already passed through a wall and departed. She had vanished from where they were hiding. After staring for 2 seconds, Zio bit her lip and suddenly turned around and changed direction. She headed straight for the warehouse. Soon, she arrived beside her destination, but she wasn't in a rush to enter. She looked up and observed the area above her, seemingly trying to find another passageway, one that was less noticeable to the people inside. At that moment, her keen senses made her turn her head and see a figure appear around the corner of the wall. The figure wore a black dress with a head of brown, curly hair. She had a pair of light blue eyes. It was none other than Furz Wall. Didn't you leave? Despite being surprised, Zio didn't forget to lower her voice. Furz curled her lips and said, Weren't you fleeing too? Zio was momentarily at a loss for words. After a few seconds, she asked, How did you notice it? You didn't even mention Sherman. That's completely unlike you. I've already prepared a reason to persuade you. Furs quickly replied. Zio was taken aback as she said with a complicated expression. You didn't have to come back. Furs ignored her and pressed on the wall of the warehouse and said, If we keep talking, perhaps we will no longer need to be stumped because it would already be over. Man, I actually didn't think of such a good idea just now. I should have immediately insisted on going with you to save her. You definitely would have persuaded me otherwise and would think of doing it yourself. If we repeated the conversation a few times, everything would have ended on its own. Zio gave her friend a look and, without any hesitation, stood by her side with wintry blade in hand. Furs immediately flipped Lamino's travels and augmented her friend with beyond her powers. Then, she put away the spell book and grabbed Zio's shoulder with one hand, pressing the other on the wall again. While Zio was waiting for door opening, she realized that Furs hadn't immediately used her powers. This best-selling author took a deep breath and quickly said, After entering, we'll hide and observe. After confirming that there's a chance to do something, we'll take action. If there's really no chance, or if we can't seize an opportunity for sure, we'll leave as soon as possible. That way, we can at least avenge Sherman and not be buried alive with him. Only by being alive will all kinds of possibilities open up for us. Zio immediately nodded and replied in a stern manner. Okay. Furs wanted to say a few more words, but considering how she had wasted some time and couldn't afford to waste any more time, she opened the illusory door and passed through the wall with Zio, coming behind a row of wooden crates. With her no longer being a greenhorn in such operations, she instinctively crouched down and pulled out Lamino's travels and flipped to a particular page. Zio similarly didn't dash in. She bent down and moved her eyes to a gap between the crates and observed the empty region. The female-looking Sherman was sitting on a wooden crate without any signs of anger. Her brown hair was gently fluttering in the wind. And standing in front of her was Viscount Stratford. This captain of the Royal Guards tightened his collar and was surveying the area, a mystery as to what he was looking for. Unfortunately, you're only a demoness. Don't worry. I will let you die without any pain. You will be completely purified. As he spoke, he took out an item from his inner pocket. Zio used her enhanced vision from the interrogator potion, and she clearly identified the item. It was a cross accessory covered in bronze. There were a few sharp, jagged protrusions, looking as though it had once impaled someone. Its style and characteristics were things that the various nations in the Fifth Epoch's northern continent didn't possess. It exuded ancient vibes. Very good. You know that resistance is futile, Viscount Stratford said as he pressed one of the fingers he used to hold the bronze cross onto the spike. His bright red blood immediately flowed out and was absorbed by the spike, seeping into the object. The mottled bronze on the cross's surface disintegrated, revealing a corporeal form beneath that was a blob of light. In just a second or two, the item Viscount Stratford held had turned into a resplendent cross. It emitted a pure and flawless glow, illuminating the surroundings in an abnormally bright manner. The wooden crate's shadows quickly receded as the dark splotches on the wall evaporated like water. Beside Charmaine, the countless spider webs that originally belonged to Trissy floated up and struggled in the fire, melting in just mere seconds. The light grew brighter, but they weren't blinding. Black flames burst out of Charmaine's body along with crystalline ice. They turned dim, transparent, and eventually vanished under the illumination. Within the range of the resplendent cross, there weren't any traces of evil or abnormalities present. Not 1 inch of darkness remained. Seeing Sherman's expression slowly distort, Zio couldn't help but shoot Furs a glance. She could clearly sense the terror of the resplendent cross, and she was beginning to waver about saving her. Furs also noticed what was happening and pointed to Lamino's travels. She raised her left index finger and whispered into Zio's ear. There's only one chance. I will work hard to create it for you. If it's not successful, or if you can't be certain of it, we will give up. Zio didn't hesitate as she nodded solemnly. Furs immediately straightened her body and flipped Lamino's travels to the charred yellow page. This page was filled with complicated, twisted, indescribable symbols and labels. It gave one the feeling of a strong gust of wind. Sailor Pathway's demigod power, hurricane. After observing her surroundings once again and confirming that there weren't any other enemies, Furza's gaze penetrated through the gap in between the wooden crates and locked on to Viscount Stratford. She then slid her finger gently across the charred yellow page. With an exploding whoosh, a visible hurricane soared up beneath Viscount Stratford's feet and rushed upwards. The captain of the Royal Guards wasn't able to maintain his balance from this sudden attack. He was lifted up by the hurricane and was slammed into the warehouse's ceiling. Boom! The warehouse's ceiling was torn apart by the hurricane as portions of it collapsed. Some of the fragments spun around amidst the wind as they flew higher and higher. Viscount Stratford nearly fainted from being slammed, and he failed to hold onto the resplendent cross, allowing it to fly out of his palm. When the spike with a sliver of his blood left his finger, the mottled bronze covered the cross's surface once more. The flawless light vanished in turn. Upon seeing this, Zio didn't hesitate to rush out of her hiding spot. Her eyes first reflected Viscount Stratford's figure before two blinding bolts of lightning lit up. Psychic piercing,